Hi everybody, welcome to the TSSW first day CPD. We're going to go through some like introduction and housekeeping first, but can I just apologise for the late start? We were just about to broadcast and then the internet connection dropped, so that hence the delay. So the way the day is working is that we will have 2 hours this morning, so we should finish just after 11:30ish, and then we'll resume again for 2 hours this afternoon. Both broadcasts will be, you need to sign in separate, so you've signed into this one. When it ends, you will then need to sign into another one. But I'm just going to hand over to Mark Drew for a formal welcome.
Hi everyone, thanks Andy. I'm not going to put myself on the screen, but you'll see Andy will remain on the screen there. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us. I think we have 22 people here, which is great, so thank you very much. And as Andy said, this is day one of his quality of education and quality of education in PE and school sport programme. I know it's probably not easy for everyone today. I know some of you have got children at home, childcare responsibilities, etc. So you may have to dip in and out a little bit of the sessions, but we are recording the sessions, which I will send to you afterwards, so you'll have time to catch up and to watch any parts of it again that you like. We've got Andy's colleague Simon Roach in the background, who is looking after the technical sort of support side of it, so hopefully it will go slowly, it will go smoothly. I know when Andy was talking just now, he was sort of dipping in and out a little bit, but hopefully his internet connection will hold for both sessions. As he said, we're on this morning from 9:30 to 11:30, and then this afternoon from 1:30 until 3:30. So this today is really it's session which is part one of Andy's programme, as I've said, but this is also part of a wider sort of Sport England funded project, which is aimed at supporting you to develop a high quality PE and school sport and physical activity curriculum for your schools. And the idea, obviously, at the end of it is that we increase the sort of amount of physical activity that your students are doing now, but also will continue to do, hopefully, in the future. This whole project, funded by Sport England, focuses on professional development. So as well as this quality of education in PE and school sport programme, which is a 5-part thing, which Andy's leading on, we also have funding to support other training and CPD, which really hope you'll make use of. And that's quite bespoke, really, and it's going to be down to you to decide how that money is spent for you, but also within your clusters, or even wider than that if you want. But if you can keep that in your mind throughout this sort of today, but also the other sessions that we're running, because we want you to decide how that could be best spent to help you achieve the outcomes of the programme. But anyway, I won't babble on anymore. I'll hand back to Andy in a second. We're really fortunate to have Andy Frapwell lead this, and you've met him at the launch event. So yeah, brilliant. Over to you, Andy.
Okay. What I'm going to do is get Simon Roach, who works he's working from home at the moment, but our AFB office staff, who is the technical support for this, and he's just going to take you through some of the controls and how we're going to work the webinar for you asking questions and so on. So Simon.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thank you very much, Andy. Basically, you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen a load of white boxes. If you don't currently see it, there is an orange button with a white arrow contained within it to expand that box, and you'll see just a couple of boxes there, audio and chat and questions, for instance. So if you want to ask a question at any point during the webinar, you can type it into the questions tab, and then myself, I'll be monitoring that throughout. If there's anything sort of technical I can help with, but otherwise I'll assist Andy in answering any questions that we can throughout. So it's fully interactive, so you can ask a question and we can get Andy to respond to that as you go through. So if you have a question that's quite long or requires a bit of discussion, what we can do is we can unmute you and you can then speak to Andy directly as if you were talking on Skype or Zoom, for instance. So we can do that. So by all means, use that facility and we can get your questions answered. So that's lovely. So Andy, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, so I can't see my. Oh, you weren't going to tell them about the sizing of the video and the.
Yeah, you can make the you can pull out any of these boxes. If you click and hold the grey part and drag it, you can drag it out from there and you can resize it, etc. Each box is fully, you can make any size you like. So if you hold it near the end of the box, it will give you 2 arrows in which to expand it.
Oh no, Rochi, at the moment I can't see my.
To your presentation?
No, I can't.
We can see housekeeping with me on it currently.
Yeah. Okay.
There you go.
Right, sorry, thank you. So basically on this first day, the apologies again, really, what we were hoping for if we didn't have these surreal circumstances that we've got at the moment with the COVID-19 pandemic, that we were going to do practical session. And I really wanted to start with a practical session so you could see some of the stuff in practice and some of the ideas in practice that we would then be moving towards. So unfortunately, there won't be any practical session today. However, as Simon mentioned, we will try and make it interactive. So part of this basic session, the 2 sessions, basically, we will be linking into the introductory session that we ran down in Devon. I can't remember the name of the hotel, but where I met you all, and we're linking into the purpose of the session and focusing on that process of change, but how we're going to change our professional practice in that context. And I'll create a better and bigger rationale for that as we go through. But referencing the Ofsted framework, we will be looking at intent, implementation, and impact. So today, I'm going to kind of skim through those 3, but the focus really is on the intent bit today. The next session planned for June, and we'll do some housekeeping around that this afternoon, we'll be looking at implementation and monitoring the implementation and impact. So there's parallel processes going on here. One is the actual management of change process around our intent, implementation and impact for the project. And then there is your own intent, implementation, impact in terms of your curriculum design in schools. I think Mark has sent this out to you, and I said, look, today, this will be the indicative content. And I've stuck pretty much to that. So we'll crack on. So the first question for everyone really is why change? And I'd just like to give you a couple of minutes to reflect on that, about why why change? And if people in the chat can just, if you want to add ideas, you don't have to. But why are we looking to change? And it's rehearsing some of the information I gave you at the introduction, the induction event, about why is the government giving Sport England £50 million to involve all schools in this project. So a couple of minutes. Okay. I've had a response. So yeah, what part of the reason, as I think it's, my eyesight's, I'm losing it. I can't really. Is it Guy Cook? Look, part of the reason, as answered here, says tackle obesity in young people. But at this point, I really do want to create a rationale, and this is some information I did share with you on the introduction, is that in 26 years of National Curriculum PE, 1988 was the Education Reform Act that started, that made physical education one of the foundation subjects and a compulsory subject on the national curriculum. If anyone know your history, prior to that, since 1946, the Education Reform Act in 1946, schools were only required by law to provide facilities for physical education. So it wasn't until 1988 that we became a bona fide part on the physical education national curriculum. And in 1990, I think then after that Education Reform Act, 1990, we started the implementation, and in 1992 was the first reported assessment around physical education. And interestingly, in 1992 was also when Ofsted were inaugurated, that great institution as part of our education system. So, but since 1990s essentially, so 26 years if you count from 88, 26 years of National Curriculum PE has led to figures around, these were figures that came out in 2012, around the time of our Olympics. But at the time, 84% of 5 to 15-year-olds and 92% of 5 to 15-year-olds, that's boys and girls respectively, did not meet the Chief Medical Officer's 2011 physical activity guidelines. Since the Olympics, the two focus sports, which were cycling and swimming, where nationally we tried to get more people involved in those sports and get the country more physically active. That was the legacy that was intended from our Olympics. Participation rates actually went down. So why change? Well, 26 years of national curriculum PE hasn't impacted on our headline figures diddly squat. And so, and it's not just our fault, it's part of society because of Xboxes and PlayStations and other interests that are taking children's engagement, children and young people's engagement. They'd rather engage in other stuff than be in our gang around being physically active. So in term, so yeah, it's not our fault. However, we are part of the system, and as activity rates have fallen, obesity rates have risen. And if you look at the hidden agenda, really, in terms of the burden of that then on our NHS, it's far cheaper for the who are our heroes at the moment. It's far cheaper for the government to invest money like this in getting children physically active and let that become a habit for life as part of a healthy, active lifestyle. It's far cheaper to invest in that than it is to be the incidence of ill health and disease that besets the National Health Service. Why else? Why change as well in terms of our system change? Well, we need to provide the foundations really for the change that we want to see. So when Ofsted carried out their research, their third phase of research prior to the new Ofsted framework, they stated that there was a significant minority of schools where there was a disconnect between what they were intending and impact. So the impact did not measure sufficiently the school's intent. And when we then look at any change process, that research is also telling us that 70% of change initiatives fail. This is something that if we really value children being physically active as part of a healthy, active lifestyle, this is something we really do need to get right this time. So the way that TSSW, Dartmoor TSA, have gone about this, if I can just pull up a document. Simon, can I just check that that is showing on the screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. So there are lots of models in terms of change, and this is the model that Martin Smith, who's based at Oakhampton and is also working on the project, and you met him at the introduction, working on the project alongside Mark Drew. The Education Endowment Foundation have done lots of work with TSAs around the country in developing a management of change process, if you like, that they would recommend schools to follow in ensuring change happens. So remember the statistics, 70% of change initiatives fail, and this is one that we really can't afford to fail. If it goes well nationally, the government will invest more money. We will see more money coming down through these funding streams. through Sport England, with national organisations like AFPI support. So what I'm going to do over the next few slides, these handouts will be available to you. There are lots of models for leading and managing on change, which essentially this is what you are going to be doing back in school, in engaging more children to be physically active and addressing whatever issues and problems there are. So I'm going to take you through the first 4, because today is all about the intent bit. So we're going to get to a point where we feel prepared to develop, to have written an implementation plan, the delivery, and then the evaluation then will come next. I keep losing it off my screen, apologies. So the delivery and the sustainability will come next in our June date. Okay, Simon, can I just check that that's gone back to the PowerPoint?
Yes, we're back on your PowerPoint now.
Brilliant. The first thing that the Education Endowment recommend is that, look, you don't see this as a chore, a burden, an event that we've got to go through. See change as a process. So change will happen over time. The DFE currently, from their research, Department for Education are currently saying, look, as a result of any input around professional learning, once we start implementing any changes, it will take up to 2 terms for us to see any impact. So the way this project has been timelined is that the idea is that you've got a long run-in to create your intent, to develop an implementation plan. We've got a long run-in in terms of before the project actually starts, before you start implementing strategy. So the idea is that by September, you'll be ready to start project implementation. At that point, if schools are still shut down, if we're still, please, let's not be on lockdown. This, by the way, I didn't mention before, this is my first lockdown haircut. The kids had to go with the clippers. I don't want to turn around and show you the back of my hair because it's just, there's lines and steps and all sorts where they were messing around. And my missus had just given me a trim yesterday just to try and take some of the lines out. But yeah, lockdown haircut. Although I haven't had lockdown shave this week. So long lead in time enough for you to prepare and get implementation plans readied and then sent into Mark at WestEx. There will be opportunity. So before the lockdown, I ran an event in WestEx for, let me think, it was Ollie, Will and Colin. I can't remember the surnames. In terms of doing some mentor training them up to be working with you, which are originally going to be twilight sessions, but this afternoon we will go through the organisation for that and how we might weave that into the process, whether it's through Microsoft Teams, Zoom, some kind of video conferencing, where they will coordinate sessions with you between my sessions. So at the moment, I think 3 people attended that training. We had a whole day face-to-face, the last face-to-face session I did. And they will then be helping coordinate this in between. So this intent stage is going to be informed by the surveys that have gone out. And you will get ideas from your own school surveys, the responses from your children, and you need to strategize those ideas, prioritize them, and then look at the stages of the project, create some stages of the project. You've got then from September, I think it's virtually a whole school academic year to see some impact. So if we look at the DFE recommendations, it's 2 terms before we see some real impact. The strategies have embedded and are enhancing your practice and children's new behaviours. So we've got an extra term from that. So there's plenty of time for implementing your strategies. I'm sharing these first 4 steps, and then we're going to start looking at some of the information that will inform your padding out of this. But part of what you need to do, if you've got school policies that are working well, align this with your school policies. So if, because, for example, on Ofsted, there is a new category around personal development, then, well, this afternoon I'll show you a document about that, but if personal development, if the school have developed a new policy, or it's part of SMSC, whatever it might be, or you've got a new policy on character building or something like that, then align it to those school policies, align it to school development. You are more likely to gain support. So I've got a little task for you at the moment, and I'd like people to either through the questions or the chat, just to list some of their ideas. The task essentially is part of good leadership and management on any project is to identify people who will lead on, who will engage with the project. Now, I just want to share some research with you. There's about, it ranges from about 7 to in the 20s about the different types of personality. It's that complex and that detailed of the research into people's responses to change. And this is really, really important to understand, because it will, or potentially will, determine whether the project is implemented and has impact and has reach, or whether the impact, where, as the data we shared with you earlier, whether 70% of the of your planned change initiatives will fail. That's what stats show, and we need to buck that trend. So the 3 broad categories, if we synthesize those 20-odd different personalities and responses to change, the 3 broad categories are: 1, those people who are what we call bandwagon jumpers. You share an idea at a staff meeting or a department meeting, and without any thinking, that person is on board. And I've just used the term to broadly describe that type of person: bandwagon jumpers. They will jump on the bandwagon without any real thought, preparation, and so on. But they're people you need to develop that kind of critical mass in terms of you've got some kind of movement, if that makes sense. The second broad category of people's response to change is what we call rational adopters. And you need these people. These are people that will question. They will think about the idea or the strategy, the change that you are trying to sell, and ask maybe at times some difficult, some challenging questions. But again, you need these people on board simply because they will evolve your thinking and evolve your planning and evolve your strategy, because they're like a sounding board, because they aren't afraid to question. And the third category of response to change is what I term Stone Age obstructionists, or your Jurassic Parkers. So these are people that no matter what it is shared, no matter what is introduced, you get responses like, yeah, we've done this before. I mean, I don't need to do this. I'm doing it already, when clearly they're not. They're really very reticent to come on board. You've got at least one, I'm sure, in your schools, in your staff rooms. People who are reticent to change. Now, sometimes it's because they've never been asked. Sometimes it's because they're coming across as so negative. It may be that these are the type of people that you want on board, because everyone else is going to pick up and notice, and then you don't get these dissenting voices. So all I want you to do now for yourselves, and I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that, is to identify people that you would want working on your project. And what I mean by that is, we haven't got any strategy or anything set yet, but what we have got is that we want this to be whole school. And what we do know is that you need to have someone from the senior leadership involved in your school. So you need to identify an SLT person who has voice, or it could be your principal, it could be your head teacher, but or if it's not, somebody that has the ear of your head teacher or your principal. So you need someone on the SLT, because change is more likely to happen and be implemented if you have got someone from that on board. So I want you to identify someone from SLT. I want you to identify your bandwagon jumpers that you think, no matter what I go to them with, that they will come on board. I want you to think of some rational adopters. And I want you to think of maybe some Stone Age obstructionists that you think, by giving them some kind of role, we don't know what it is yet, but by giving them some kind of role, people will sit up and notice. Now, when you think of stakeholders, can you think, obviously, outside of PE, other subjects? It could also be parents, and it could also be governors or people from the local community. So just have a little list, make a little list now of people that you want to involve in this project. It's not a finite list, it is movable. It's not set in stone. So a couple of minutes just doing that now. And if anyone wants to share any of that with me through the questions or chat, then please feel free to do so. Okay. So you are compiling your list, you're identifying potential stakeholders, individuals. I'm just going to refer to some of the questions. Student leadership, there's a question here about saying, would student leadership be applicable? Definitely, most definitely. It may be that you've already got some kind of leadership program that's integrated into your Key Stage 4. I know even when I was teaching and working with schools since, lots of people used to do what was then the old GSLA, Junior Sports Leaders Award, and the Community Sports Leaders Award. Now level 2 and level 3 with Sports Leaders UK. But even if they don't follow that, sometimes that's a separate program, but even if it was integrated into your physical education program, so that you are developing young leaders, leadership skills in and through your activities, whether it be games, whether it be gymnastics. I mean, essentially leadership is, the basic unit of leadership is decision making, and you can make decisions in an autocratic or a democratic way. So involving students in this, in whatever way, shape or form. I mean, I've got children now. The one lad's just come home from, I've got children. One lad's just come home from university. He's in his first year at Liverpool John Moores University doing football science. I've got a lad in year 10, Louis, aged 14, and Martha, aged 15, is in year 11, age 16 even, sorry, in year 11. So she won't be sitting GCSEs this summer, which I'm pretty glad at, really, because she gets quite anxious around exams. So we won't have to face all that. But working with them at home in these last few weeks, and when we look to tackle problems as a family, whatever that might be, around doing DIY, decorating, garden, how we're going to plan our day and our activities, some of the ideas that they come up with are brilliant, are absolutely brilliant. So definitely I would involve young leaders. I mean, it may be that you've got in your schools, you've got focus groups already, or you've got sports captains, but those type of people, but also others that you identify from different targeted groups. So not just male, female, but underrepresented groups within your school, special educational needs, and so on. So everyone can be a leader and everyone can have ideas. They don't have to be sporty or the most physically active person to do that, but they may be very, very good ambassadors, very, very good advocates for promoting physical activity. So by all means, do that. And then there's another question here which talks about, does there need to be a balance between the group, and would you say that too many people too early can be negative? Yeah, start small, and that could just be with your PE department, and some of the people, the stakeholders that you've identified now, you then start talking to behind the scenes when you begin to strategize your ideas. And that's important that you strategize your ideas, because then the list of people that you've got, those that you think that will come on board easily, those that you think that will question, but you kind of need that sounding board, or and it's definitely someone from SLT, and then those people who you are identifying as objectors, but you still need to get them on board so that they don't present a barrier to any implementation. You can then start being strategic about the different groups that you set up, and we'll come back to that a little bit more. Okay, so what? Right, so Simon, what is on the screen at the moment, fella?
The 2 intent to utilise school policies stakeholders slide.
Okay. So I can't get that now to come on my screen. I just enlarged all the questions.
In the top right hand corner of questions, there's a box. You can shrink it to the docking panel.
Yeah, I've done that. Okay, I'm back now. I'm sorted. Thank you, fella. Now, in terms of incentives, what you can do is give responsibility to, I was going to say younger members of staff, but less experienced members of staff in terms of building their leadership capacity. And this is where this helps you in the future, because you're developing infrastructure, you're developing leadership capacity and capability within your team and outside of your team. Because I mentioned parents, and I mean, I remember working on some community engagement. I had a role when I was a teacher, an assistant head in schools, developing community engagement. And one of the things that we did, we put a newsletter out asking parents about what they can offer and how we might use that and so on. And we got a massive response. At the school where my children are locally here in Worcestershire, maybe because they know what I do, but I've never been asked, and I would, I've never been asked to go in and give any talks to whether or not I'd be interested in giving some free CPD to the school because my kids are there. I've offered, look, if you want to use me in any way, shape or form, I've offered, but yeah, maybe they don't want to open the doors and expose practice, but knowing what I do and so on. But parents, something that happens from sort of primary school to secondary school, where when my children are at primary school, parents just the schools have to turn them away. Huge turnouts at parents' evening, huge turnouts at fates and all that kind of stuff. Huge number of volunteers. Then at secondary school, it steps back. But if we can continue that and engage parents, I know schools that we work with in some of the earlier rounds of the project where parents have taken the minibus test, they're driving minibuses, they come in and referee activities, they'll host activities. Yeah, there's issues in terms of DBS and we've got to get all that sorted, but they're things that can be overcome. And once you get groups like that set up, it becomes sustainable, and parents run it themselves and come up with some really, really good ideas if you let it run. So building leadership capacity, and that was just one idea. And I'm just giving you further ideas about who you involve and so on. But when you develop your teams and identify your teams, there may be people that sit across a number of teams that are responsible for certain strategy, but keep them small and keep them probably 4 to 7, no more than that. 8 apparently is the worst number you can have in a team for making decisions. When you get 8 in a team, the team hardly ever, it takes a lot longer to arrive at a decision, research has shown. Okay, so what we're moving to now is the importance really of our baselining, so that Education Endowment Foundation say, look, you really do need to have a firm hold on the problem or the extent of the problem, and that everything that we are doing on this project should be evidence-based. The decisions that we make should be informed, whether our own evidence from our school's audit or whether it's from research that's out there that we can use and help steer our way forward. So I'm going to progress straight on really, because it is what it says on the tin. You make sure we have research or evidence-based practice when we are making decisions on this project. So this, I shared these slides with you on the introduction, that I'm presuming everyone who's on here today was at the inauguration event. That the headlines of the Sport England survey into activity levels were shown there, and the one main point that I made was that, and this has been mirrored in all of these projects, is that there are there's that 29% of children that we are not engaging with our current offer, whether it be physical education programs, our extracurricular programs, any volunteering opportunities that we offer, community programs, community clubs to transition into, that there is this chunk of, despite improvements over the last few years, this group of children and young people is remaining pretty static. So there's a third of children, no matter what we are doing at the moment, that are not engaged in terms of being physically active as part of a healthy, active lifestyle. So now we're, in terms of baseline and research informed, we're coming to your survey. So Mark sent these. I'm only showing 4 or 5 slides. There's a dozen or so that he sent over. But at the moment, the surveys that have been completed, the school names along the bottom and the amount of respondees across the top. Now at the moment we've got something like, I think it's just over 5,000 from the projects, the schools that are involved in this project. We've got about 5,000 responses, so we can see some sort of patterns emerging. If you haven't been able to, because of the lockdown and that, get this out to your students, this afternoon maybe Mark will talk about how that can be made available, survey links and all that kind of stuff. But school, we have had some good responses from schools, but there are, as you can see, not many from others. Okay, one of the questions talks about 30 minutes of physical activity. The Chief Medical Officer's guidelines is 1 hour on average of moderate to vigorous activity per day. So on average. So even if you looked at this and said, oh, the less active are probably 0, 1, 2, maybe going into 3 days, because that isn't even a majority of the days in the week. The percentage of children, you're into that sort of third of children reflected in the data that's coming back from all of your schools. Now, you will have access to your own data, your own school's data, and can interrogate it more, but I'm just giving you an overview of this is of all of the schools. So already in the Southwest, or in Devon anyway, in the schools involved in this project, we are seeing similar patterns. I know this only says 30 minutes or more, and we want an hour or more, but we're already seeing patterns similar to national. This is just a slide that says this is the number of people who, I suppose, what's the word now, identify as girls and identify as boys. But 53% of girls have responded. Of the 5,000, 53% are girls that have responded so far. Again, this is broad brush, this is generic. It doesn't necessarily mean it's indicative or reflects your school students' perception of physical education. But again, if just visually, I don't enjoy PE. I often don't enjoy PE, and I sometimes enjoy PE. We know from research that enjoyment and competence are two key factors in whether children go on to be physically active in their behaviours as part of a healthy, active lifestyle. So that nearing a third, represented by the red, blue, and orange slices, it's moving towards your third again. So there's although it's not, we haven't interrogated, we haven't researched it, but there's an association between people who don't enjoy PE and whether or not they are physically active for sustained periods of time. And the only other one then, two more graphs are pulled out. One is what motivates you to be physically active, and the other is about what stops you, from being physically active. So interestingly on there, this whole feeling good about yourself and being healthy are some key motivational factors about children being physically active. But these are the messages that we need to advocate. These are the messages we need to promote really consistently through all of our PE lessons.
Andy?
Yeah.
We've got a good question here from Guy Cook. Can I ask why we only looked at 30 minutes rather than the hour? What's the reasoning behind it?
Thanks for that, Simon. These surveys have been developed by Sheffield Hallam University. There's a chap called Tim Vernon who leads on this, and I know Mark has done a lot of work with him to try and extrapolate these graphs from the Excel spreadsheets, from the data that he's been able to access. But it's Tim Vernon who has set the questions. No, I honestly don't know why they asked a question about 30 minutes of activity rather than the hour, which is the Chief Medical Officer's guidelines. I'll try and find out from Tim and answer that, but it gives an indication it gives an indication of daily physical activity. But there's nothing to stop schools, nothing to stop individuals taking a sample of children and extrapolating further data. So these surveys were commissioned by Sport England. It's Tim Vernon who leads on it at Sheffield Hallam University, and they do these pre and post the project. I do recall Tim talking about the reach that they wanted to ensure they captured all children on this, and they felt that putting an hour out there may well skew the figures slightly. So they wanted a start point at least.
Also, Andy, there was an active Devon survey. We were asked to complete at the same time as the Sport England survey. Can we use data from both?
Of course. So you can use data. What this does, this allows Sport England to report to government about the use of public funds. So Sport England are accountable to the government for the 50 million that they've been granted to run this project. Now, so they've got to show pre and post data as to the extent of how the reach of this project and how successful it's been in its impact around getting children more physically active. There's talk already of this survey being extended in terms of after the timeline of this project, 6 months and in the year after, to see whether or not any changes in behaviour, of course, around physical activity have been sustainable. So it's to ensure there's some measures in place, but schools will use other measures as well. So if there's an active survey in Devon, yes, by all means, use that. But on this particular one, it will be children specific to your school. The ones I'm sharing at the moment is the overview that Mark Drew has access to, but he's going to he'll talk this afternoon, but he's going to ensure that we get individual school access. You'll be able to see your individual school. So yes, use any assessment information that you've got from in your PE. Use any registers that you use about children participating in extracurricular activities, whether or not you get children to keep diaries about their community involvement, or community sports, or community physical activity involvement. Any other survey, yes, but this will be used specifically for Sport England reporting back to government. So it's asking exactly the same things, and one will be at the start of the project, one will at the end. The active live survey, I don't know how often that takes place, but that could be, if it's an annual basis and it's just happened, then we could use this time next year to look at any improvement on that. So yeah, definitely. So use any available information that helps inform your decision making about what strategy you're going to use to address some of the issues. Is there any more, Simon?
No further questions at this time.
Well, thanks, mate. So this one was about what stops you from being physically active. Well, we know from research that so again, much of the information here isn't anything new. Sport England have come out with there's a poster to say the barriers from being physically active, and much of that is reflected here. But we know that if children enjoy PE and they feel competent, and there is a lack of negative experience, then they are more likely to engage in physical activity habits. So that feeling of being competent in an activity, and that's in its broadest sense. So that's like you know, your thinking competence, your how you feel competence, and your actual physical competence has a big effect on your confidence. And I can't remember if I mentioned at the introduction event that we talk about the 3 C's in PE rather than the 3 R's in the curriculum, but the 3 C's being competence leads to confidence to continue. And it's no surprise that feeling self-conscious and lack of confidence are 2 of the biggest inhibitors to children being physically active. So yes, this is for all schools, and yes, students were able to put down more than 1, so it's not going to add up to 100%. But we do need to take note of that, and that's a large factor, as it was in the British Heart Foundation survey that said 86% of boys, stats I gave you earlier, 86% of boys and 92% of girls did not meet the Chief Medical Officer's recommendations of 1 hour of moderate to vigorous physical activity a day on average. And the biggest reason that both boys and girls gave for that, and you can break these down when you get the individual data into boys and girls and mini cohorts and that kind of thing. But the biggest factor was lack of self-esteem. That children did not feel comfortable in this body they live their lives in, therefore they didn't do more of what didn't make them feel confident, didn't make them feel good about themselves. So we do get some pointers from the survey. Again, this is from all of the schools, 20 plus schools in the project. But this is a graph that's saying what children would like to learn in PE. And although you can't see the full question, you get an idea of the first one is about the benefits of being physically active. How to be physically active. How to lead and organise activities, the 28%. So these are things that children say they'd like to learn. Now, there's a slide I don't think I've put up. There's a slide that talks about what they enjoy about PE, and it's something like 45% of children say that they enjoy games. Now, one of the things that we've had in previous phases of the project, and this is phase 4, all the schools involved here now, we're in phase 4 of this national rollout, so that eventually every single school in the country would have been touched by this project. People are looking at data, 45% of children and really do enjoy games. And yeah, games is a traditional part of the program, but as with anything, it's about how it's taught. And we've had a number of schools that are saying, well, we need to move away from some of the traditional aspects and try out new activities and all that kind of thing. And then on the post surveys, we've then had a drop off in terms of the people that like games, and overall the results haven't been as good in terms of what they enjoy doing in their PE program. So change in terms of the activity or the curriculum content isn't in terms of the activity. Yeah, let's be clear about this. And change in terms of the activity isn't necessarily the answer. It sometimes could be as simple as just changing the way you teach the activity, so that you advocate some of these things here, so that you integrate some of these things here, the benefits of being physically active, how to lead or organize a session. So this type of thing can be integrated, incorporated, rather than taking the place of, depending on what your students respond on the survey, rather than taking the place of traditional curricula that actually work quite well in engaging a fair number of students. So I think the phrase is something like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Okay. So part of the intent on this project is then, once you've interrogated your data, once you've used the Devon survey, once you've used an audit that I'm sure as effective heads of PE that you carry out annually, once you've spoken to some of your stakeholder groups, already got people that you've identified that you can involve, that you can then start specifying the interventions that you want to make. And that could be all, I'll just say some examples that have worked quite well on previous projects. That could be in tutor group, all the tutors advocate the benefits of being physically active. It could be that someone leads on that and develops a program, or you purchase programs that are out there. It could be that some form of physical activities takes place during tutor time. It could be then that you involve parents in some way in increasing the offer. But if you increase the offer and that offer isn't as good, you've got issues. So you could run training for these type of people, for some of the coaches that you've got who come in, for parents who want to come in and help. So this afternoon, when we really start shaping some of our actions or shape our ideas further, Mark will just share again some of the opportunities you've got, so that we've got money to, in terms of this training, is provided for you free. You're not paying to attend, and you can then also, with groups of schools or individually, you can tender, you can apply for more money funding through this project to do specific activities or specific training, essentially. But that needs to become part of a coherent program. The last point on there about preparing implementation infrastructure is that part of the implementation infrastructure is provided by the steps that you are following from the Education and Endowment Foundation research into the steps, the stages that you need to go through in leading and managing change. So we need to get these foundations right in terms of providing a strong base for springboarding the project, springboarding engagement, so the project is successful. We do not want this to be one of the 70% of project initiatives that fail. And this slide I highlighted last time at the inauguration event, which is basically saying that when, yes, we'll have ideas for activities, but coordinate and prioritize them into coherent programs. So from a broad perspective, that's what Mark and Martin have done as part of this project. And I'm just kind of looking to equip you with the tools, as well as give you some ideas in ensuring this project is embedded and successful. So that, I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes break. So if you needed to use the loo, or you just needed to grab a quick brew, I say that because I do need to use the loo. I drank too many coffees this morning. But But in terms of parallel processes, we've looked at the first 4 stages of the EEF, the Education Endowment Foundation recommendations about leading and managing change. In reference to this project, the other 2 are implementation and sustainability, and we'll deal with those in June if we're able to arrange that date. But the bit that we're going to go on to now is the intent around your own practice, your own curriculum design. With reference, we're going to reference a national curriculum. So that is a reference document I'm sure that you've all utilised and then used flexibility to personalise curriculum for children. Maybe moving away from this, but we are going to use it as a reference point. And when we go through it, the points I want to share will because I know I talked to a few people after the event, and some people have used the whole kind of head, heart, hands around cognitive, affective, and psychomotor domains. Some of you have already used that as a reference point. But in terms of hearing it from the horse's mouth, you can then gain ideas for any changes that you might make to further engage children. So in a couple of minutes, we'll have a little break, but what we are essentially looking at is the curriculum policy that informs our curriculum design around intent, implementation, and impact. And we constantly need to be reviewing this about whether or not it is achieving what we set out, what we intend. So important. And if what we intend aligns to the second bullet point on those aims there around children being physically active for sustained periods of time, and the fourth bullet point, leading healthy active lives, then if that is the aim and we are referencing NASA curriculum and these are the aims of our program, then this project is measuring that, whether or not children are physically active and whether they lead healthy active lives. And if we're not achieving that, or we've got this 30%, this roughly a third of children that are less active or disengaged, then we are not achieving our intent and we do need to make changes. Okay, so a couple of minutes and we're just going to go through that, and then we'll then we'll have a break till this afternoon. So 2 minutes. I'm just going to shoot another quick loo break, and I'll see you in 2.
Hi, Andy.
Hi, mate, you're right.
Mark, I don't know who's listening, obviously, but a couple of questions have come in about the survey. Daniel Gillard has asked, said doesn't remember seeing the email. I've just resent that to the email address I've got for you, Dan. So hopefully that should be in your inbox now. I did send out a PDF for each individual school to everyone here. Hopefully most people receive that. That was taken from last week. So if students or members of staff have completed the survey since that, then they won't be included, but I can obviously send you another one at some point once your students and staff have completed it. So we just need to liaise on that. So if people could let me know. I know that there's a message here from Melanie saying that you currently had 153 responses. However, the link has gone out again, so you should have more by the end of this week. So what I'll do is then liaise with Tim Vernon, who Andy's mentioned from Sheffield Hallam, because he has to do something to the data and then send it to me. I can access all of the survey results and see them, but I'd have to download each individual graph separately, which takes quite a bit of time. Tim Vernon at Sheffield Hallam Uni's got a clever little Excel document where he can download it. I can then export the data, turn it into a PDF, and email it to everyone. So so bear with me on that, but just let me know if you want an update. If you know that you've sent it out and you've got more responses, just email me. I think everyone's got my email address, and I'll get those sent out.
Yeah, I mean, it's an ideal time really for students to complete the survey as part of any like PE tasks that you want them to complete. So yeah, in this lockdown, we should get probably more responses, hopefully, than many of the other projects have got, project phases.
Daniel's asked if they can send the link out again. Yeah, definitely. In the email I sent you last week about today's session, I included again a link to the surveys, and also to the email I attached the list of the questions for your information, and also the document that explains gives guidelines basically about sending the survey out to students and staff. So yeah, please, this isn't the end point. If you haven't sent it out already, then please do, or if you want to get more responses, then send it out again. That'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things Sport England have done, and they've learned from the previous phases, the pilot, phase 1, 2 and 3, is to give a longer lead-in time because of little hiccups like this where the schools don't get links or unable to connect up, or Sheffield Hallam, Tim Vernon has made a mistake or something in providing the information. So we've got, people shouldn't worry even at this stage that we've got plenty of time to get to ensure that data comes in, and then we can really have a good look at where we are in June. And that'll, if that day goes ahead between now and June, in your clusters, I think, Mark, is it Plymouth, Exeter, and what's the other one?
Oakhampton. Yeah, we've got schools here from across the county, so we sort of clustered them geographically.
Yeah,
but if some of the sessions in between your webinars or face-to-face sessions, so if some of those twilights that we're going to run, if they can be done virtually via Zoom or some equivalent, then obviously people can dip into any of those. But I think what we'll do this afternoon is talk about that further and do, if we can, if Simon can organise some sort of poll to to find out how people prefer to do this, but I think virtually at the moment.
Righto. So we're going to hope everyone's got a brew, tea, coffee, or some kind of refreshment, and sitting comfortably again. So what I want to take you through now is this is a statutory document for all state maintained schools. If you're an academy, then you have greater flexibility. However, the way the national curriculum was written was that it was for greater flexibility anyway. But you've got a purpose and aims, which I'm just sharing there, and this is just taken from the Department for Education 2013 document. And we can see the influence of research there, especially from Sport England and the British Heart Foundation, that says that children need to feel competent so that they feel confident to continue. And so our first aim there is that children do develop competence to excel in a broad range of physical activities, but that is, as you'll see in a while, that it's not just physical skill competence. So it's thinking competence and behavioural competence. We can also see then from the Chief Medical Officer's guidelines that were released, the new guidelines at the time that were released in 2011, and this document came out in 2013. The aim in P was influenced by that, that children are physically active for sustained periods of time, and that's moderate to vigorous activity. And that is as part of a healthy, active lifestyle. So important if we really do value physical activity. And then the final one, engage in competitive sports and activities. So it's sport, it can be recognised sports, but it can also be recreational activities. Okay. On the purpose of study, the way I've written it there, it's written as a paragraph, but I've split it into the 3 sentences that that form that paragraph. But there are a number of key words in there. One, the phrase, the word all. So this is an inclusive curriculum. It's based on inclusivity. And it's also around some of the soft skills. So it's not just physical skills and tactical strategic thinking that you need in competitive sport. It's also children understanding health and fitness, and that they are engaging in activities that build character, embedding values such as fairness and respect. So it is our soft skills. Now, this afternoon, I'm going to go deeper into all of this. So I'm just kind of giving the overview this morning, and we will search into them deeper. But the character, the fairness and respect bit, it's written, and building character is written all over the personal development category in the new Ofsted framework. And there's a document I'm going to share with you this afternoon that really does highlight that. But for now, what I'd like you to do is a little task. Again, if you want to share that with me so I gain some insight through the chat, that would be great. Or even through the question thing, you use that as to give a statement. Is to say, look, what is it that you want your, and you can do this for a key stage, or you can do it for the whole of the school. So by the end of key stage 4, at the very least, what do you want your children to be doing in terms of their performance in physical education? What do you want their behaviours to be like? What do you want their thinking and decision making to be like? So that's the question I have for you. So I'll repeat those questions. So what do you want learners to be doing in terms of their performance in physical education? What do you want their behaviours to be like? And that can be like good, bad behaviours, but it can also be physical activity behaviours. And what do you want their thinking and decision-making behaviours to be like? So those 3 questions are based around the domains in which we know children learn and grow: cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. Which in a book in 2015, I authored for the Association for PE, and we refer to those 3 areas as head, heart, hands. So you could do this for the end of Key Stage 3 or preferably do it for the end of Key Stage 4. So the end of their schooling, the end of 5 years with yourselves. What do you want them children to be doing, thinking, and behaving like? So just jot down a few ideas. Okay. Looks like a couple of people have kind of answered this. This is probably a task also that's better convened with your department. But one of the things when we undertook the review of this national curriculum, sorry, of the national curriculum, which was, I think it's 2000, was it 2008? 2007, 2008. We reviewed the previous curriculum. We started that in around sort of 2010, and then this curriculum came out in 2013. But one of the tasks that we used to do was to give departments, when we work with departments or huge rooms of 100, 120 people in attendance working on tables, is to say, envisage the perfect PE student when they leave you. How do you want that student to look, and in particular, how is it personable? How is it personalised in terms of our own school? What makes that student in our subject, in our school, different from a school 3-4 miles down the road or 30-40 miles down the road? And so you get lots of comments around how they want children to behave, how they want children to respect each other, how they want them to be committed or determined. So you get lots of value-driven language that comes out that influence people's opinions on what they want children to look like, what they want students to look like. We want them to be resilient. We don't want them to keep giving up. We want them to push themselves. And so once we get information like this down and saying, right, this is what we want them to look like, these are the behaviours that we want them to display, especially around being physically active, and we want them to come to at least one sport or activity club a week, at least as a minimum, in addition to their physical education programme, or that could be a community club. So once we kind of start getting some value-driven words and statements down, we can then look at the kind of rhetoric reality gap. So that's the rhetoric. This is what we vision for our students. What is it now? We can start using some of the data and saying, well, we want 100% of our students to attend either a community club or an extracurricular club once a week. We can start to quantify it. But when we engaged stakeholders and went through this national curriculum, we took all the feedback. I mean, I was involved in the stakeholder group. We took all this feedback and wrote that into programs of study for Key Stage 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now, all that we've got here is that because we know from research these are the domains in which children learn and grow, all we've done is framed the national curriculum in the same way. So for Key Stage 1, the language from the programme of study, we have synthesised that language into bullet point format. It represents everything that's in the programme of study. There's nothing missing. The language is probably more concise and more obvious, but we framed it around the doing, thinking and feeling, being. So everything that we get children to do in PE and everything we get them to think about in PE should produce a positive effect in terms of the way children feel about themselves in that context, which leads to a positive effect. Sorry, it leads to a positive. Everything we get them to think about and do, leads to a positive affect, which then itself leads to a positive effect in terms of them voting with their feet and being more physically active, physically engaged in terms of your PE programs. So everything there, and this is the key stage 2. And it may, I think there was a question or a comment or a statement from somebody before about, well, could we be working with your year 6, your key stage 2, in terms of them starting with you in the September? Yeah, of course. And part of what you are using them as a stakeholder group for your, in terms of year 7, you could involve them in some way, shape or form in their curriculum design, but you'd have to be careful about how you go about that. But there's nothing wrong with giving them some voice and choice even at that stage that informs your curriculum design for September. The way this is framed then is that all the bulleted points are statutory and the context themselves are statutory. So there's nothing on that slide there which is synthesized from the programme of study. If we're referencing the national curriculum, there's nothing on that slide there that is optional if you're a state maintained school. So all of that is compulsory, all of that is statutory requirement. But for all academies, which I think you people are from, then this is, you have greater flexibility, but this can be a reference point for you. So in terms of a broad and balanced curriculum, the context that we've laid out are the context that we feel that all children should gain access to and have opportunity to participate in terms of broad and balanced. But you can see even from the way those contexts are written that there's scope for choice, your choice, their choice, depending on the opportunities that are available given your timetable, given your facilities. So what's important to understand here is that all of those bullet points are drawn from what we know about childhood growth and development. All the research into childhood growth and development says that we know from all our research that unless children are special educational needs or disabled, they will be able to achieve these things. So they will be able to develop expert technique in different contexts. They will be able to apply those techniques across different sports and physical activities. All children, if given sufficient opportunity, should be able to do these things from everything that we know about childhood growth and development. So that's the first thing that's important to know. And that each of these bulleted learning statements, if you like, are sequenced. So already the sequencing from key stage to key stage is the order in which we know from growth and research into children growth and development that these things will happen in these orders. And broadly speaking, in our key stages, the children got 2 years to be able to demonstrate those things. In key stage 2, 4 years to demonstrate that. Key stage 3, if you haven't condensed your key stage 3 program, which is a bit of a nightmare if you do in a P context, because growth and development tends to follow a pattern, but so 3 years to achieve this, and then 2 years to achieve the learning there. The next point I want to make is that each of those bullet points indicate to you both the content. So Ofsted are keen to say that we need to teach the content and a depth of that content to students, but also the criteria. I'll explain a bit more this afternoon, but I'm going to give you a little task at the moment, because if you're using this as a reference point and you sit down with your department team and say, okay, I want to use a range of tactics and strategies. So I'm looking at the middle column on Key Stage 3, and I'm looking at the third bullet down. So use a range of tactics and strategies to overcome opponents. So subject knowledge and our coherent and consistent approach as a department team is important in terms of children having access to that learning, the right learning, the depth of learning, and feeling competent in that learning. So when you review your curriculum, whether it's to reference it more closely to this national curriculum from what you've got now, or whether you are reviewing your curriculum because you've already gone through this and integrated it into your design, the first thing you've got to be looking at is the language that's used here. So we want to use a range of tactics. It doesn't specify the number of tactics or the number of strategies. We want to use a range. But more importantly, we need to know what the difference between tactics and strategies are. What I want you to do now is list in the questions, please. List in the questions what tactics are and what strategies are. What is the difference? Because people use these terms synonymously. I'm only taking one of these bullets out of 11 bullets at Key Stage 3. So one of these bulleted learning statements. Tactics and strategies. What are tactics and what are strategies? Just answer me that and then I'll make the point I want to make. So what are tactics and what are strategies? They're used synonymously. A lot of people use them synonymously, but what is the difference? Okay, enough. Thank you for those responses. I mean, I'll summarise them, and pretty much people are on the right lines. But I'm just at this point highlighting the importance of understanding the language of learning in physical education, and then applying that to our curriculum design and also our teaching and learning. And this, remember, can be depending on the activities you choose, because there's no requirement to do any specific activities apart from it talks about outdoor and adventurous activities and dances. Where it talks about direct competition and team and individual games, it doesn't actually specify the game. So the range of tactics and strategies could be different from one school to another. But if we take any activity really in say basketball or in football, we say, okay, our strategy is that when we lose the ball, we are going to press. We are going to operate a pressing strategy. We are going to go and press the opposition. That is an attacking strategy. The tactics that we need to employ that strategy, different people will do different things. So it might be if you have a tactical formation in a football and it's 4-4-2, that the front two will split. The front two will work as a pair and go and close the ball down. The back four will squeeze the space to deny the opposition space. And so different players and different units within the team will maybe have different tactics, all conforming to achieving the strategy of a press. In basketball, I mentioned that we might be doing man-to-man, we might be doing half court, we might be doing full court press. But as soon as we lose the ball, each individual will know their role, their tactical role as part of the attacking strategy, which is the press. What I've started to mention there is also the fact that I talked about a press. Once students have understood those tactics, and if they've understood the strategy, they can then apply that in a different context. And we're already now starting talking about what mastery learning is. Mastery learning is that we can apply learning from one context into another context. So once they've got the principle of what a pressing strategy is, they should be able to apply that principle to another activity. Once they understand some of the tactical roles and responsibilities they need to carry out in different positions as part of that pressing strategy, they will be able to apply those tactics in another activity if they have mastered that learning. So more on that this afternoon. Now, whether or not if you're doing this from scratch and if you're looking for some more focus, part of children being competent is us being competent ourselves in exactly what the tactics and strategy are, and as a department saying what tactics and strategies we are going to include in our range. And that helps us make a decision about what activities that we do and so on. And once we've decided the tactics and strategies, you've got to start saying, okay, what do we start with in year 7? Where do we start on tactics and strategies? I'm not going to ask you, it's a rhetorical question. You know, if I ask you where would you start, some people might start with overlap as attacking strategies before looking at pressing, and that's the order, that's the sequence they want to do them in. But once we've got our tactics and strategies identified in terms of the content that you as a department want to implement and ensure learners feel competent at learning that content, we're on the way to engaging children more in terms of being physically active, because they need to feel competent. We need to present this in a coherent and structured way. So once we've identified tactics and strategies, I'm only looking at one bullet, obviously, at the moment. We're going to look at more this afternoon. We are then going to sequence that through year 7, year 8, year 9. We're going to scaffold it across the key stage. So sequence it throughout the year, scaffold it across the key stage. So the first task really in curriculum design, referencing this national curriculum, is understanding the language of learning, sequencing it and scaffolding it. Okay. So this afternoon, I want to talk more about some of the values. I want to talk about what mastery learning is, and we've touched on it being knowledge learning that is applied. I want to look at, in terms of the values, I want to look at the personal development category of Ofsted. But more importantly then, as we go through, it'll be giving you ideas from the surveys that you receive, and referencing this national curriculum, ideas of how you might go about scaffolding, constructing, scaffolding and sequencing your curriculum. Or if you feel you've gone through that, and I know I talked to a few people after the inauguration event, if you're already at that point, that how you can then use this for curriculum review. There was a question, I haven't checked any more of the recent ones, but there was a question about what books there are. There are a number of books about auditing, about curriculum review. There's books on teaching and learning pedagogy, there's books on assessment, but there's not a book on the whole process around intent, implementation and impact. That might be an idea to maybe write one as a result of this project. If anyone fancies co-authoring, then let me know. We could put something out there. But what is important that it's research informed and evidence-based. We're not plucking this out of the ether. We're not making up stuff on the spot. We are using research informed and evidence-based practice. So everything in this national curriculum is research informed. We will look at this a lot deeper this afternoon. So I'm going to go into this in terms of the intent phase still this afternoon. In particular, the whole business around constructive alignment. Yeah, thank you for your attendance and contribution so far. We will remember that you need to log on again with a new link for this afternoon's seminar. I'll speak soon. Thank you.